The universe often presents surprises that you don't expect. It can spin the wheel of life in any direction, killing and resurrecting, turning you into angels or demons, and no one knows which way it will turn towards you tomorrow. And that's what happened to Elizabeth, a policewoman of the 5th District, 7th State. A 24-year-old police officer participated with her colleagues in detaining a large gang of drug dealers. They worked on the case for several months and finally got on the trail. But something didn't go according to plan, and the main character felt the cold steel of a weapon on the back of her head. She had no chance at all. The sounds of shooting disappeared, everything became quiet and calm, and Elizabeth saw in front of her the distant appearance of her mother, who had died many years ago. The girl grew up without parents, her hands stretched forward. The girl looked at the hand, then around, not understanding what had happened. She knew for sure that one of the shots was hers. The enemy did not miss. The young lady was sitting on a luxurious bed in the middle of the large hall, her long curls hanging over her half-naked shoulders. The mirror completely scared Elizabeth. In front of her stood a young girl of about 16 in a sexy costume that she once wore to a school play. The main character tried to figure out what happened to her and how she was able to deceive time. A bald old man entered the room. A man found an unconscious girl high in the mountains and brought her home. Her appearance enchanted him. Now he was waiting for a reward. Since her school years, Elizabeth had been practicing hand-to-hand combat. So, within a few seconds, with one blow, the owner of the house was knocked to the floor. The main character headed towards the exit. What she saw shocked the girl. She stood on the balcony of a high tower. Dragons flew past. Far below, you could see small houses and horse-drawn carriages. The brain refused to perceive the situation. It was like the Middle Ages. The elder, together with the guard, was catching up with the fugitive from behind. The servant received orders to seize the girl. Lightning flashed, and after a moment Elizabeth realized that she could not move. An unknown force pressed her to the floor. The main character guessed that it could be magic. The owner of the castle turned out to be the eminent Earl Baxter Smith. He was very angry and promised to deal with the ungrateful beauty. As a fighter, the elder sent the girl to the slave battle arena. The main character's rival was the invincible Joe, who repeatedly brought income to his master through winnings in fights. Elizabeth was chained, restricting her movement. The judge announced the start of the tournament. Everyone wanted the death of the fragile but brave slave. The wrestler had no doubt of an easy victory and was the first to rush into the attack. Daily training in the gym was not in vain, and the policewoman easily dodged the blow. The girl took the opponent's hand in a grip. The next moment, the opponent was lying on his shoulder blades. The spectators were shocked. They could not understand how a strong man was suddenly defeated by a very young slave. Joe stood up, supported by a screaming crowd on all sides. The wrestler's second attack also ended in defeat. Luckily, Elizabeth saw a crack in the chain. The police decided to take advantage of the pause while the enemy gathered forces. The girl broke the iron chain with a sharp movement of her hands. Elizabeth's signature blow knocked out her opponent. Joe had no more strength to resist. Baxter noticed that the chain was broken and ordered the guards to detain their prey. The girl understood that she could not hesitate for a minute. To get onto the wall, Elizabeth jumped onto the shoulder of the defeated enemy. The hand reached the top. All that was left was to pull myself up. The main character managed to rise from the arena to the spectator stands. The Count again tried to detain the fugitive. Jumping on Smith's head, Elizabeth easily soared above the rows of surprised spectators. The girl did not know that the slave battlefield was on the upper floors of the trading castle, and it was almost impossible to escape from there. The height was at the level of the 10th floor of the metropolis. There was no turning back. The guards were catching up with the fugitive. The guards were ready to capture the slave again. Having already experienced the power of magic on herself before, Elizabeth understood that she needed to act. The girl's only hope was the roof of a long carriage passing below. Elizabeth pushed herself harder and jumped down. The main character understood that just one small mistake and she would crash on the paving stones. The cart was already very close. It was necessary to group. The third prince of the kingdom of Sylvania, Armando, together with his assistant Ray, was returning from a neighboring state. Suddenly, a strong roar forced the servants to stop the carriage. Having broken through the ceiling of the cart, the main character landed right in front of the heir to the throne. The girl looked boldly at the stranger. The young man's penetrating gaze noticed the sexy clothes and chain around the neck of the unexpected guest. But most of all, he was struck by the stranger's open gaze. People gathered near the carriage. They demanded the extradition of the runaway slave. The Count was most indignant. He thirsted for revenge. Elizabeth snatched the small blade from the wagon owner's sheath and held it to his throat, demanding that he give instructions to leave her alone. Ray tried to protect his friend and master. Elizabeth was surprised that she attacked the prince himself. Armando ordered, and the main character fulfilled her promise, returning the weapon to the owner. The prince was absolutely calm, and the policewoman's experience suggested that he was not at all afraid of her threats. The young master invited the girl to stay with him as a pawn, pretending to fulfill his wishes. Elizabeth was forced to agree in order to understand the unfamiliar situation. The owner gave his servant and assistant orders to calm the indignant pursuers. The crowd saw the third prince and the excitement subsided. Armando and the girl got out of the carriage. His Highness, in front of all those present, declared Elizabeth free from slavery for all time. The crew set off on their further journey, accompanied by surprised glances from the spectators. Count Smith was most indignant. The slave was almost in his hands. He really wanted to take revenge on her for all his humiliations. Only in the evening did the travelers reach the palace. The maids were shocked by the appearance of the gentleman with a stranger in his arms. Elizabeth was happy. She finally managed to take a bath. After the water treatments, the head maid escorted the guest to the owner's apartment. The main character indignantly opened the door and looked into the mansion. The policewoman had not worn a long dress for a long time, so she carelessly stepped on the hem. Unable to stay on her feet, Elizabeth flew forward with screams and roars. The surprised prince was sitting on the bed with a book when his new girl landed next to the noise as he introduced her to all the inhabitants of the palace. The main character was very upset. Armando put the book aside and looked at his guest. Elizabeth categorically refused to be the woman of the savior. The agreement was concluded only as a diversion. The prince brought the girl up to date with the events. In the current situation in the palace, the only safe place for her was the seat next to him. Refusing to sleep on the small sofa, the main character climbed onto the bed. After a busy day, the girl fell asleep almost instantly. The dreams were different. Elizabeth was at home again, returning from her shift. The serene home environment gave way to the threats of a stranger with a sword on the roof of a metropolis. The girl felt everything as if in reality, even the force of the blow. Unable to resist, the main character flew down from the high roof. The girl woke up in a cold sweat and found that the owner of the palace had already left. The maids prepared the dress that the prince left for the guest before his departure. Elizabeth put on the outfit. She did not like the bright jewelry, and the appearance itself, it gave the impression that the clothes were small and pressed on the body. The maid offered to have breakfast and warned that then there would be a meeting with the master's official bride. The chosen one was supposed to be Stephanie, the youngest daughter from the noble family of the Duke, but the prince did not want any relationship with her, so he offered the role of his woman to the unknown Elizabeth, relying on her courage and intelligence. The young duchess and her maid were waiting for their competitor. Unable to bear it, Stephanie went through the palace halls in search of the arrogant girl who did not come to her call. The rivals met in the middle of a spacious hall. Elizabeth's elegant dress amazed the bride. She had seen something like this before. Having decided not to spoil the relationship from the first minute, the main character, on the advice of the maid, greeted the noble person with a bow. The maid Stephanie reprimanded the girl and slapped her in the face. Elizabeth did not expect the attack and did not have time to dodge. Her cut lip cracked and a drop of blood appeared. The main character no longer intended to tolerate insults. While the rivals were getting acquainted and sorting things out, at the work residence Armando was finding out the origin of the stranger's name. Not finding any information, the prince ordered Ray to enter the girl's new details. At this time, the maid again intended to teach the rebellious beauty a lesson to the commoner. This time, Elizabeth intercepted the blow. Stephanie's maid didn't expect any resistance. The bride's faithful assistant managed to escape. The maid took out a tube and shot her mistress's rival with a magic arrow. At the last moment, the main character managed to dodge. The tip flew very close and easily entered the wall. The stone cracked due to the effects of magic. Elizabeth was ready for battle. She was not satisfied with being killed right in the palace. The bridesmaid suddenly took out a blade and prepared to attack. The faithful maid did not have time to take a step when she fell dead to the floor, bleeding from being hit by magic arrows. At the entrance to the hall stood the second prince of the kingdom, who decided to save his brother's new chosen one from death. His Highness greeted Elizabeth, who was shocked by the girl's death. Jackson was the opposite of Armando. Only his deep blue eyes showed that they were close relatives. The prince introduced himself and invited the guest to show the palace. The young man showered Elizabeth with compliments, admiring her beauty. The main character did not like the gentleman's sweet speeches. She politely said goodbye and left the hall. Jackson watched Elizabeth leave, appreciating her courage and intelligence. The head maid shared some information about the history of the royal family. There were 3 heirs to the throne, but the eldest was the daughter, so she did not claim the title. Her name was Patricia. The second was the same Prince Jackson, who easily took the life of a maid. The third child and second contender for the crown was Armando. The main character realized how dangerous it was for her to be in the palace in the status of her younger brother's chosen one. She was determined to talk to the master. Ray reported to his master about Elizabeth's arrival. The prince was busy, but the girl did not wait and burst into the office. The main character briefly described the whole situation that had developed between the heirs and asked to give her a weapon. The assistant was shocked by the intelligence of the guest, who during the day took stock of the situation and drew conclusions. Armando did not need the young duchess. She only complicated his path to power. To get rid of the official bride, the prince offered Elizabeth the role of his woman, using the latter as a puppet, creating a threat to her life. The conversation continued. The girl easily deflected Armando's arrow and continued speaking. The prince simply wanted to make sure of his guest's dexterity. Satisfied with the result of the check, the gentleman agreed with the girl's demands. In parting, Armando asked Elizabeth not to wear the dress she was wearing anymore, which surprised her, because according to the maids, it was his choice. Ray received the master's instructions and led the guest to the weapons room. A training field was located in the castle courtyard. A detachment of the prince's best guards improved their combat techniques here every day. The soldiers were surprised to see the owner's assistant with a girl in the yard. Not a single female person had ever visited these places. The young men could not understand why the girl was heading to the weapons storage room. The squad leader, Marcel, was dissatisfied with how quickly his team was distracted by the stranger and ordered the training to continue. The armory truly had a royal selection. The policewoman's attention was drawn to a small, sharp blade, the kind she confidently used for various official purposes. Ray moved from short blades to swords. The girl's gaze settled on a beautiful wooden box. The main character asked the attendant to open the box. What she saw immediately struck the soul of the weapon lover. It was a pair of special swords made of an unknown alloy, very light and durable. The girl took the blade out of its sheath. It was all glowing. Ray explained to the guest that it was a gift from a neighboring kingdom. The prince did not use it. The peculiarity of the blades was the constant replenishment of magical mana. Elizabeth made a choice. It was necessary to find a source of energy that had to be constantly nearby. The girl decided, as an addition to the weapon, to choose a guard who would provide her support. The detachment was built on the training ground. None of the fighters agreed to Elizabeth's proposal. The squad leader explained to the police the position of his colleagues. All the guards were invited by the prince himself to ensure their safety. They were the best of the best. The main character realized that Ray was cheating, agreeing to build a battle group. He knew the result in advance. Elizabeth, without hesitation, snatched the sword from the scabbard of her escort. The girl pointed the sharp blade directly at Marcel. Elizabeth suggested a duel without the use of magic. The dress was unsuitable for fighting, so the beauty borrowed clothes from Ray for a while. Her appearance was stunning. The commander, on behalf of the entire group, accepted the stranger's challenge. The fighters watched the strange battle with interest. They had never seen girls with a sword. Despite the desire to win, Elizabeth had little strength in her new youthful body. She had difficulty repelling the attacks. Marcel managed to avoid the police's blows. The sword turned out to be not as strong as it was needed and cracked. Elizabeth was not taken aback and suggested continuing the fight with fists, in which she was much more experienced than in using knives. The commander laid down his sword and prepared for further battle. The main character continuously attacked the enemy. Marcel had never seen such a fight before and did not have time to fight back. Having received a powerful kick from his opponent, he lost his balance. A couple of subsequent attacks by the fragile beauty finally finished off the formidable fighter. The decisive blow knocked the guard off his feet. The squad watched the fight with excitement, not understanding how the girl was able to defeat their leader. Marcel lost consciousness for a few seconds. Waking up, the warrior knelt before Elizabeth and apologized. The commander agreed to be her bodyguard, but the main character refused to help, realizing that he was thus abandoning the detachment and accompanying the prince. Despite everything, Marcel agreed to become the young lady's protector. The main character took the warrior's oath. It was time to return to the palace. Upon arrival, Ray reported to the master about the results of his visit to the armory and the guests' combat abilities. The prince thought about the unknown past of the fragile girl who freely defeated his best knight. Returning to the palace, the main character went to the bathroom under the amazed looks of her maids. The steam stood over the small warm pool, and Elizabeth took off her uncomfortable shoes in anticipation of bliss. The girl did not have time to take off her clothes when her feet slipped on the wet floor, and she flew straight into the water, frightening the prince resting there. The indignant beauty demanded to make room for her and leave. The policewoman wanted to lie alone in the warm water, summing up the day. Armando explained that according to legend, they were a couple in love, and he could not quickly leave the room, inviting the girl to join him. Elizabeth refused, content with a wooden tub of water. It was not possible to enjoy the water procedures. After getting dressed, the young people left the bathroom. As expected, the courageous prince carried his chosen one in his arms. The maids watched their master's romantic relationship with delight. Left alone, Elizabeth and the prince continued their conversation. The young man said that his beloved had recently been killed due to competition for inheriting the throne. Armando understood the mortal danger of having a guest in his castle. At a distant estate, the third prince's fiancée, Stephanie, was still saddened by the unfortunate death of her faithful maid. The new maid's name was Helen, and she was trying to calm her mistress down. The entire duke's family gathered in the main hall of the estate for a council. The head of the family had heard a lot about the appearance of his daughter's rival in the palace and made plans to eliminate her. Elder brother John advised Stephanie to return to her chosen one and continue to charm him. Despite her status, the young duchess was well versed in the family business. Nobles owned mines with numerous slaves, but she was not ready to fight her competitors. The duke promised to deal with the stranger. For this purpose, he had already hired a killer, and Stephanie was even upset in her heart, sympathizing with her rival. In order to test her new weapon, the main character went to the security training base. The fighters spent whole days practicing, improving their techniques. The girl took out swords of magic, offering a duel. Remembering what happened to their commander, the soldiers categorically refused to fight the guest. There was not a single security guard left on the stadium field. Everyone fled, suddenly remembering their urgent matters. Marcel had only to offer himself as an opponent. The bodyguard told a little about the magical abilities of some of the inhabitants of the kingdom. The warrior discovered the information that not everyone had a magical gift. It had to be activated from childhood. The main character asked to show how the energy charge works. The force of the sword's impact after being recharged became destructive. All day long, Elizabeth tried to master the control of the new weapon. The girl realized that warriors with such destructive energy do not need other techniques, so she easily managed to cope with the leader of the squad in hand-to-hand combat in a battle without the use of magic. It got dark. It was time to return to the palace, but Marcel could not stand on his feet at all. Elizabeth realized that with her training, she had thoughtlessly spent the entire energy reserve of the bodyguard. The main character was helping the warrior get up when lightning suddenly flashed. The guard managed to protect his ward, covering her with his hand from the arrow. A stranger stood on the roof of the wall, saddened by his unsuccessful attempt. The unknown warrior was wearing a mask and threatened to kill both. Marcel ordered Elizabeth to run away while he tried to apprehend the killer. The girl was in a militant mood. She found a powerful energy charge and was not going to leave the battlefield. To cope with the task, the killer had to have enormous mana, which was what the swords needed at the moment. At this time, the killer opened a flow of magic. The bodyguard activated the capture weapon and was ready to repel the attack. The couple deftly avoided the energy charges. The killer was upset. It was not possible to quickly deal with the victims. The enemy turned out to be stronger. Marcel's strength was running out. He asked Elizabeth to leave him alone and run. The wound on the left hand from the arrow also took energy. The main character was not going to give up. She suggested a tactical move to her partner. The mercenary moved in for close combat and activated his fire sword. The squad leader had unique abilities, for which he was invited by the prince. He was able to repel the magical stream. The girl was nearby, the swords were loaded, and she hurried to help Marcel. The killer used magic again to stop the beauty. The policewoman's sword easily pierced the hand that sent the fatal charge towards her. Now the guard and Elizabeth were attacking, and the killer was defending himself. One of the blows managed to send the mercenary into a deep knockout. The girl was glad for the break with the bodyguard. Suddenly Marcel staggered and fell. The energy ran out and the young man lost consciousness. The killer woke up and took advantage of his advantage. The main character's fiery sword was full of mana and reliably protected its owner. Now the mercenary was trying to escape from his potential victim. Elizabeth was not going to let the killer go and attacked him. The police managed to catch up with the criminal. He was exhausted from the rapid consumption of energy reserves. The girl really wanted to take off the mask hiding the mercenary's face. In front of her stood a guy who looked like a beautiful girl. The killer's name was Martin. He was very embarrassed about his face. Elizabeth offered the mercenary to die or become her second bodyguard. The young man needed help finding his sister, who was enslaved in the mines, so he was forced to agree in order to stay alive. It turned out to be even easier to deceive the customer, since he had never seen the killer's face, so Elizabeth got a new maid, Martha. The next 2 days, the girls spent time in the palace library. The main character tried to master reading an unfamiliar local language, wondering how she could understand everything and speak it. Ray visited the guest and said that the bodyguard had just regained consciousness, but was still weak and did not get out of bed. Elizabeth got ready to visit the guard, sending Martha to prepare drinks. The girl was glad to see Marcel alive and unharmed. The young man was surprised by the appearance of his mistress. The main character knew that she could trust the warrior and said that his weakness was her fault. She continued to use energy recharge from the young man, even when he was unconscious. At this time, the head maid entered the library and gave a task to the new maid. She had to wipe the dust from numerous books. After half an hour, Martin could not move at all. He did not understand how the girls easily cope with their clothes and heels. The false breasts made it difficult to breathe. The maids decided to meet a new colleague and went into the library. The girls found Martha trying to get rid of the inserts, accusing her of having a special breast enlargement to attract the attention of the prince. The duke's estate was waiting for news. The mercenary did not get in touch, so the head of the family realized that the assassination attempt on the prince's chosen one had failed. To her surprise, Stephanie was pleased with the message. It was time to return to the palace. The new maid, Helen, was ready to protect her mistress herself and destroy the impudent stranger. The duke and his son agreed with the maid's plan. There was a guest at the second prince's residence. The young man often spent time with his new girlfriend, Baroness Roxy. In Jackson's eyes stood his younger brother's chosen one, with her charming, stubborn look and independent gait. The beauty was upset that she could not devote much time to her prince, since her mother rarely let her go to the palace. Roxy happily told her chosen one that she was pregnant. Jackson's mood changed. He ordered the servant to escort the Baroness home. The girl was upset by the hasty separation, but the prince promised to visit her, having whispered a few words to his assistant before that. Elizabeth continued her conversation with the bodyguard. She trusted him completely. Marcel was surprised by the attitude of the prince's chosen one towards him, but remained faithful to his master. Several years ago, Armando freed the warrior from slavery, seeing great potential in him. Martha prepared a healing decoction and headed to Marcel's chambers to fetch her mistress. Ray came across the maid. He was surprised by the beauty of the new maid. The young man offered to help and escort the girl. Thanks to the assistant, Marta quickly found Marcel's room. The bodyguard reluctantly drank the bitter medicine. Elizabeth introduced the new maid to her guard, telling him where the hitman had disappeared to. The main character really wanted to go outside the palace. The assistant conveyed her desire to the prince and received permission with instructions to accompany the girl. Armando was surprised that his guest was going to visit the lands of her enemy, Count Baxter, who was a subordinate of the second prince. It was time to begin searching for and freeing Martin's younger sister. The conspirators gathered in the library and discussed the plan. Elizabeth and Marcel were supposed to distract the guards of the dungeon, where the slaves spent the night after working in the mines. Martha and Ray, dressed in women's clothes, had to go down to the dungeon and find a sister with the same name as the eldest, among a large number of small slaves. The prince's servant tried to refuse to change clothes, but to no avail. So another maid, Elizabeth, appeared. It was time to hit the road. At a reception with the young duchess, friends discussed the news about Roxy, who had an accident when her carriage overturned. Those around her saw severe bleeding from the fragile girl. Stephanie had been friends with the modest, sweet baroness since childhood and was dissatisfied with the negative attitude of others towards her. The girl did not recover from the disaster and lay on her estate under the care of doctors. Having learned about the grief, the Duchess decided to visit an old friend. Roxy was very pale and upset. Stephanie tried to calm her friend down and find out what happened to her. The girls were left alone, and the young baroness said that she had lost her child from Jackson. The Duchess tried to calm the inconsolable girl as best she could. The doctors told Roxy that she would no longer be able to have children. It got dark when the conspirators reached the outskirts of the city, where the dungeons were located. The police officer repeated the action plan again. Newly made girls had to, without attracting attention, go to an underground prison where slaves were kept at night. Having agreed to meet, the friends went their separate ways. On the way, Ray told Elizabeth where mana comes from. Initially, it was to find a rare spiritual stone. The abilities of a magician could only be developed until the age of 12, so not many people possessed these skills. A prerequisite for the child was activation with the help of spiritual people, of whom there were even fewer. Without them, it was impossible to awaken abilities. Very rarely, adults could independently master magical power. Among these units was Marcel, whom the prince sought to join his guard. The main character was shocked by the new information. It was time to act. Elizabeth and her bodyguard went to search for the guards. The security was in place. It was necessary to take them away from the entrance to the dungeon. The path was clear, and Ray and his partner, dressed in women's work clothes, went downstairs. Martin recalled his childhood years when his little sister Martha played with him and braided his hair. Hundreds of young slaves were behind bars. The young man ran around the dungeon and called the girl. The smell of dirty bodies made it difficult to breathe. Martha asked the girls about her sister. While the search was fruitless, it was necessary to go further along the dark corridors. The resistance of the guards was useless. They were guarding children exhausted from heavy physical labor, so they did not possess magic. There were only 8 guards, and the conspirators quickly isolated them. The main character heard crying and looked up. A cute baby was sitting in a cage under the ceiling. There were tears in the huge eyes of an incomprehensible little creature with animal ears and a bushy tail. Elizabeth had never seen such creatures. Marcel said that there are werewolves who are caught in the wild forests and sold to rich nobles as pets. Little Charlie was one of them. The girl was ready to free the cute baby and waved her sword. A strange animal with a human body, claws, and tail hoped for salvation. The cage broke, but the height was great. Elizabeth called the baby to jump, intending to catch him so that he would not crash. Charlie jumped and fell straight into the arms of the savior. Sweet, bright eyes looked widely at the girl. The main character did not wait for gratitude. The cunning animal bit her on the shoulder. Marcel did not have time to warn the hostess that werewolves could be dangerous. Taking advantage of the confusion, Charlie escaped. Elizabeth suddenly felt very weak. Her whole body did not obey her. Marcel took the girl in his arms so that she would not fall. This was a temporary effect of the werewolves' saliva, which quickly wore off, giving them the opportunity to hide. At this time, the search for Martha continued. The slaves did not know where the girl could have disappeared, suggesting that she fell ill and was taken to an unknown direction. Martin was very upset by the unsuccessful attempt. He had to look for where the sick children were sent. Charlie ran through the corridors of the dungeon. He was also looking for his little sister. Suddenly, the werewolf felt weak, oddly enough. The girl's blood also affected him. The guards found the exhausted, shaggy fugitive. The guards did not understand how Charlie could escape and wanted to detain him. The werewolf gathered his strength and resisted, killing the first warrior. The second guard tried to use protection. Charlie was angry and used his magic. The half-beast dodged the guard's attack. The werewolf had powerful strength and easily dealt with his attacker. After examining all the dungeons, the newly minted maids gathered to meet their friends. Ray turned on the energy core so Marcel could pinpoint their location. Suddenly, stones fell from the ceiling. Having broken through the upper vault of the dungeon, something fell down with a roar. Charlie and the guard fell down, destroying the ceiling. Martin, as the maid, has heard of werewolves but has never seen one before. However, Charlie was unable to escape. A magical chain bound his throat and entangled his body. Count Smith himself appeared not far away with his guards, turning on the magic lock for his pet. Baxter took the half-beast by the skin, not understanding how he was able to get out of the cage. The watchman, who miraculously escaped from the werewolf, was punished on the spot and beheaded by the owner in front of his slaves. The gentleman knew all the characteristics of the pet and ordered to bring ticks. Charlie began to cry and tried to resist, but the chain did not allow him to breathe. The owner easily pulled out the fangs, promising to cut off the claws. Blood dripped from the mouth of the tortured werewolf. Baxter reported that there was an epidemic among the slaves in the dungeon and ordered the guards to kill the girls. The unfortunate people ran away in horror, trying to find salvation. New maid Elizabeth wanted to stand up for the girls. Ray did not allow Martin to reveal himself so as not to harm his master. The guard's magical blow was already aimed at the slaves. The fiery sword saved the victim. The main character appeared on time. Marcel and Elizabeth received the signal and went to their friends. The conspirators appeared just at the moment when the fate of the girls was practically decided, and heard the order of Count Smith, who was surprised by the unexpected appearance of the third prince's chosen one in the dungeon. The werewolf found out what kind of girl saved him from the cage and whom he managed to bite. Baxter was ready to settle accounts with Elizabeth for his past humiliations. The main character defended the slaves, convincing them that everyone's life was valuable, regardless of status. Smith did not believe that slaves could live freely. He considered himself a benefactor, providing them with food and work. The slaves grumbled and agreed with their master. The policewoman understood the state of the frightened girls. The main character tried to prove to them that it is possible to live independently without fear of being killed with impunity. Baxter decided to deal not only with the slaves, but also with his offender, coming up with an excuse about the accidental death of the girl and the suppression of the workers' rebellion. Elizabeth allegedly died from an attack by slaves, who were then punished by late-arriving guards, thus getting rid of all the problems at once. The girls finally realized that they would die in any case. The main character did not think of giving up. Elizabeth prepared to attack the main culprit. Inspired by the support, the slaves took the stones and prepared for an unequal battle. The girls attacked the guards in a crowd. The prince's chosen one fought off the attacks of the count's assistants with a sword. The fight was unequal, but the girls did not give up. The guard's magic could not cope with the power of Elizabeth's weapon. The fiery sword coped well with a crowd of warriors. Trying to protect the owner, the guards surrounded him on all sides. Elizabeth ordered her friends to defend the slaves. Marcel happily drew his sword, frightening his enemies, who were not expecting powerful support. Ray skillfully used magical power, throwing the enemy to the sides. The Count realized that he was losing. Almost all of his guards were killed. Baxter chose a shield that was supposed to save him from death. Smith threatened to kill Charlie by using him as a hostage. Elizabeth stopped her assistants with a sign. As a police officer, she clearly knew the rules of working with a criminal. The girl meekly followed the Count's instructions and knelt down, asking for forgiveness for her actions. Smith was pleased and relaxed, ready for the next demands. The assistants looked at their mistress in surprise and did not understand what was happening to the determined, impudent girl. While the main character was distracting Baxter's attention, one of the slaves attacked her enemy from behind, hitting him on the head with a stone. It was the policewoman's turn to act. Elizabeth swung her sword, cutting off the Count's hand holding the werewolf's chain. Smith was defeated. He would no longer harm anyone. The slaves were glad to be alive and celebrated their liberation. The main character's brain took her to a past life when she, as a trainee, patrolled the streets of the city and encountered a killer. The man wanted to take revenge on his former owner, who ruined him, and kill his son. The police tried to dissuade the criminal, convincing him to release the child. The man was insane. He had long been planning a plan for revenge. Young Elizabeth was afraid to shoot, relying until the last on the intelligence of the invader. The killer cut the neck of the fragile boy with a knife. The shot came too late, when the child was already seriously wounded. The hospital reported that the artery was large, and the blood loss was immediate. It was no longer possible to save the child. Despite the attempts of her colleagues to calm the intern, Elizabeth blamed herself for the delay in making a decision, as a result of which the boy died. The child's father was tried. The mother committed suicide, unable to cope with the loss of her son, and the main character was forever left with a feeling of guilt for her unsaved life. Charlie distracted the girl from the painful memories. Elizabeth hugged little Charlie and told him that everyone's life matters, no matter who they are. In a country where there is no justice, the main character had to take the decision on herself and kill the one who was taking away the freedom and lives of many others. The werewolf did not understand the meaning of the strange girl's words and hugged her tightly back. The little half-beast knew that after the death of his master, power over him passed to the mistress and decided to behave modestly. While the guards were unconscious, the slaves tied them up and asked their savior what to do with them. The main character invited the former slaves to decide for themselves the future fate of the guards. The girls were ready to take revenge for their suffering and kill everyone. Martha decided to take advantage of the situation and find out where the sick children from the dungeon were taken. The former assassin recalled his childhood. His father was a count and his mother was a commoner. Despite the difference in status, the boy grew up in a loving family and was able to acquire magic skills. Suddenly, the head of the family died, and the child and his mother were forced to leave the city and live in poverty. The woman often left for several days, leaving her son some food. To survive, Martin's mother tried to find a new man, but she only came across cruel gentlemen, one of whom she had to marry. The woman became pregnant again. The head of the family was only waiting for an heir. Unfortunately, a girl was born, and the angry husband killed his wife. The boy stopped his stepfather from taking the baby's life. Martin killed the father and took the baby. The brother left the city with his baby sister in his arms. Shortly before her death, my mother left a box for her son, as if she felt that she would not live long. The woman sold all her previous jewelry and left gold coins in a small wooden box along with a note. Martin loved the baby very much and named her Martha in honor of her mother. The girl was very nimble and grew quickly. While the young man went to work, the girl was waiting for him at home. For her 12 years, her brother gave the beauty a beautiful bow. Martha grew up as a very kind and sympathetic child. She wanted to help children left without parents and take care of them just like her brother. The brother promised to take care of her all his life, but one day when he returned home, he did not find the girl at home and learned that she had been kidnapped by slave traders. Martin, in the guise of the maid Elizabeth, asked the guards where they took the 6 slaves. The guards said that behind the mines there was a ravine in which the dying were buried. The young man did not wait for the others and rushed to search for the burial site. One of the former slaves remembered a little girl. They met at the slave market. The baby was very kind. Martha constantly talked about her brother, who would come and protect everyone. The guards did not like the girl's conversations, and they beat her with batons and then took her to the ditch. Martin ran faster than the wind. Hope glimmered in his soul. Marcel and the main character hurried after. A terrible picture appeared before my eyes. At the bottom of a small ravine, bones and skulls of victims of slave owners lay everywhere. The young man walked doomedly, looking for the slightest sign. Suddenly he saw a familiar ribbon. There was no longer any doubt the girl died. Martin remembered his sister's words about kindness and love for children and cried bitterly. Elizabeth came closer and tried to support her friend. The main character hugged the young man. No words could help the grief of a loving brother. Martin vowed to help Elizabeth in every way possible to end slavery. The second bodyguard invited the girl to ascend the throne and make a revolution. The slaves supported the maid's idea and were ready to follow their savior. The girls were confident that the main character would be able to find the right way out and change the life of the state. Late at night, a small detachment returned to the palace. The third prince was waiting for his assistant's report. Everyone was very tired and wanted to sleep. The maids especially liked the fluffy stranger with a tail. The maids had never seen werewolves before, which only the rich could buy. One of the maids wanted to pet Charlie, but he showed her his teeth, frightening the girl terribly. Elizabeth scolded the bully and forbade him to bite. Ray, without having time to change clothes, immediately went to the owner. The main character went to take a bath. Elizabeth ordered Martha to wash the tailed pet, who did not like water at all and desperately resisted. Armando listened in amazement to the story about the courage of his chosen one and her decision to free the slaves. The young man recalled that, quite recently, his deceased lover dreamed of the same act. The tired main character reached the bed and read, waiting for the prince. Armando didn't have to wait long. The gentleman was a little outraged by the girl's behavior and her decision to bring the former slaves to the palace, not knowing what to do with them. Elizabeth calmly reacted to the prince's inappropriate behavior and offered to take care of her charges herself. Armando could not understand what his chosen one was up to and how she felt about him. In a distant estate, the Baroness received her guest. Stephanie stopped by again to visit her friend. Roxy recovered a little and already felt better. She was very glad to meet her. Work was in full swing in one of the palace's study rooms. Elizabeth drew a complex diagram and asked Martha to submit the drawing to the master for approval. The third prince was busy when his assistant brought a drawing, according to which the main character asked to allow artisans to make items for household needs. Armando did not understand what was depicted on the paper. He had never seen anything like it, but he gave his consent. The second prince was having fun with another girl when a trusted servant informed him about the death of his subordinate Earl Smith, who allegedly burned down in a large fire on his estate. Jackson realized that his younger brother was somehow involved in this. Baxter had a son, Warren, who unexpectedly became the heir to a large estate and other possessions of his father, and was very happy about what happened. The master ordered the assistant to find him and invite him to the palace. Hearing moans, Elizabeth went into the room to the pet, who was saying something in his sleep. The girl tried to cover the baby. Charlie jumped up sharply and accidentally scratched his owner with his sharp, long claws. Drops of blood flowed down the main character's hand. The werewolf dreamed of his master's cruel son, who often beat and tortured him. The former owner constantly pulled out Charlie's fangs with terrible iron pliers. Werewolves quickly heal wounds and grow new teeth. Fangs were valuable medicinal raw materials and were very expensive, which the pet owner used, constantly causing him pain. The main character was upset and went to treat her wounds. Charlie was afraid that he would be punished and beaten again, so he pulled out the healing tooth himself and gave it to his mistress. Elizabeth was surprised to learn that fangs can quickly heal any wound. The girl thanked the pet, explaining to him that he would not be harmed and there was no need to sacrifice himself. On another visit to the Baroness, Stephanie met with Roxy's mother, who thanked her daughter's friend for her support. The girls drank tea and recalled their childhood years. The Duchess brought the Baroness a gift. The box contained a processed stone of the purest rock. From early childhood, Stephanie was interested in minerals. Her mother showed her a map and told her about unknown countries and deposits. The friends were passionate about jewelry stones and their processing, and often shared their successes and knowledge with each other. In the palace, the main character visited a small house, which was set aside for the residence of former slaves. Elizabeth told the girls that she would conduct various activities with them every day. The rested girls were glad to see their savior. One day, Warren Smith and his servant visited his father's patron. The young man thanked for the support and promised to serve the master. In the office where the main character often spent time, there was a large map. The head maid told the lady that part of the distant territories has not been developed, so the prince leaves every 3 years to capture new lands where various monsters live. Another trip was planned for this year. Charlie distracted the girls from the conversation. He asked them to drink tea with sweets with him. Satisfied with the conversation, Warren returned from the prince's residence. Unexpectedly, the young gentleman saw his pet in the yard, about which he was very sad, considering him to have died in a fire, having lost the income from the sale of fangs. The man turned to a stranger with a request to sell his tailed friend for a fabulous price. Charlie watched the hostess in horror. The werewolf recognized its former owner. This was the same tormentor that he had recently dreamed of in a nightmare. The main character calmed the shaking baby, not paying attention to the appeal. Warren reiterated the high price. The servant, seeing the disdainful attitude towards his master, began to insult the girl. Without warning, Elizabeth struck her attacker. The young count was shocked. His servant lay motionless on the ground. The stranger apologized for her actions and invited the uninvited guests to leave. Charlie was hiding behind the mistress. The werewolf did not understand why the girl did not agree to a higher price and did not sell him. He was ready to work off his stay with the good mistress by all means, but Elizabeth reassured him by refusing the services. Unlike the main character, Marta was not at all against getting rid of the harmful and naughty baby. From the balcony, the second prince watched with interest Warren's meeting with his brother's chosen one. Jackson was delighted with the girl's behavior and began to think that he wanted to get her into his arms. An experiment was going on in Stephanie's work lab. The young duchess managed to obtain a new crystal with the help of a spiritual stone. The satisfied girl did not notice how her older brother John came into her office. The young man, like his father, was dissatisfied with his sister's activities. He demanded to stop the experiments and go to the groom's palace. Stephanie was very upset. She did not like social balls and dresses, and mountain sciences were easy for her since childhood. Jackson quickly went downstairs and caught up with Elizabeth, presenting her with flowers. Martha and Charlie watched with excitement. The werewolf felt the negativity coming from the second prince. The main character greeted the gentleman and asked permission to pass. Jackson was not used to refusals and grabbed the disobedient girl. In a whisper, he invited Elizabeth to come to him, leaving the third prince. The main character was adamant and was able to free herself from the embrace. Then the heir to the throne decided to leave his mark on the girl's body, knowing that this would greatly anger his brother. The young lady's response was a resounding slap in the face. A small bloody mark was emblazoned on the girl's shoulder. Jackson wished him luck, because he knew that Armando would be jealous and stop trusting his new chosen one. The second prince said goodbye and headed to his apartment. The main character was very upset. The bite mark usually lasted for at least 3 days. The tea party was completely ruined. It was time to return to the palace. Upon arrival, Elizabeth found on the table parts made by craftsmen according to her designs. The girl quickly assembled the metal thing. The policewoman pulled the trigger. There was a faint bang. An iron bullet flew out of the barrel. It was necessary to urgently resolve issues with the production of gunpowder. Martha began to look for the thing that had jumped out of the unknown object, doubting that it was needed for household work. There were guests at the Duke's large, beautiful estate. Roxy decided to take a carriage ride for the first time since the accident and visit her friend. Stephanie was glad to meet again. The young Baroness was delighted with the beauty of the buildings. It was her first time visiting here. The friend noticed the sadness in the eyes of her fellow student. The girls sat down to drink tea with delicious cakes. Roxy found an excuse to send Stephanie's maid into the kitchen and began questioning the girl. Helen was unhappy. The Duke ordered to keep an eye on his daughter. The girls were left alone. Stephanie was very upset by her father's ban on doing what she loved, but she did not want to disobey him and was going to the palace to see her fiancé. Going home, Roxy was saddened by the sight of her only friend, who was always cheerful and supported her in difficult times. As a farewell, the Duchess gave the Baroness a small gift. The young beauty recalled the first time she saw the delightful Duchess at a social party. Stephanie herself came up to meet the modest girl. From all sides, Roxy heard only grins addressed to her, so she was very surprised. The friends quickly found common interests. They were both interested in crystals and minerals. Even when Roxy lost her child, Stephanie was there. She said that life goes on when you have a dream, that you had to continue doing what you love in order to forget past sorrows. The Baroness sadly left the magnificent castle, which had become a golden cage for her friend. The Duke watched the carriage leaving through the window. Father ordered Stephanie to stop communicating with Roxy and go to the palace. It was time to organize a wedding with the third prince. The girl was very upset. The head of the family had treated his daughter poorly since childhood. Only the mother defended her child. The girl loved to conduct various experiments. Little Stephanie remembered how her parents often quarreled over her. Her father refused to allow his daughter to study geology. The Duke owned a large number of deposits. Slaves mined ore and extracted valuable stones. The eldest son was supposed to take over the business by inheritance, but knowledge was absolutely not given to the young man. The very young Stephanie, on the contrary, easily absorbed the material, and at the age of 6 could distinguish rocks and recognize valuable stones. The girl did not like dancing and embroidery at all. At the age of 9, the beauty first showed her father precious stones processed with her own hands. John was amazed by what he saw, but the Duke ordered him to forget about the dream. Stephanie cried for a long time. but she loved her father and endured his attacks. For the sake of her family, the girl began to successfully master secular pursuits. One day, the Duke brought his daughter to the palace and showed her the future groom. The third prince was not alone. He was walking with his beloved along the alleys of the garden. The father reassured Stephanie that all obstacles could be eliminated. Only a week later, the young duchess understood the meaning of the terrible words. Her rival was found dead. According to legend, she committed suicide. This was the first death that young Stephanie encountered on her journey, not counting the loss of her mother in childhood. The girl realized that a wedding is not the key to a happy life and love. As a guard, the Duke sent a specially trained maid Meg to the palace with his daughter. Stephanie did not understand the purpose of protecting her. On the very first evening of her stay at the prince's residence, the duchess was almost poisoned. A faithful maid saved the mistress in time. The magic stone showed that poison was mixed into the drink. The noblewoman did not want any more deaths, so when she first saw Elizabeth, she tried to save the prince's new chosen one. Stephanie decided to intimidate the stranger with her bitchy appearance and behavior, but was unsuccessful. As a result of the acquaintance, Meg died. Roxy returned home. Her mother was waiting for her at the gate. The Baroness loved her child very much and took tender care of her. The owner of the estate always supported her daughter, and after the miscarriage, she was especially concerned about her health. The third prince was aware of the incident with his elder brother and called Elizabeth into his office. The girl was calm and talked about Jackson's provocation. The behavior of the chosen one indicated that she was innocent. Armando knew his brother's abilities and believed Elizabeth. The main character finished her tea and asked the gentleman to allow the artisans to continue making the necessary items. Excited, Martha waited for her mistress at the exit, worrying whether the prince would believe his chosen one. When Elizabeth left, Armando plunged into the recent past, when, out of inexperience, he accused his first lover of cheating. Then Jackson did the same, leaving a mark on the girl's skin. The prince no longer saw her alive. Bitterly worried about what happened, he was never able to apologize to her for the unfounded accusation. In the alley next to Armando's apartment, Elizabeth met her rival. Stephanie threatened the girl, ordering her to leave the palace. The main character did not get into a quarrel, inquiring about the state of mind of her opponent after the loss of the maid. The Duchess was surprised by the girl's insight. Before these words, no one was interested in her experiences. The next morning, the freed girls began training. Sports activities were not easy. Elizabeth was a tough mentor. The second prince was having fun with another beauty when his assistant entered. The servant reported that the eldest son of his subject John had gone to the mountains to search for new ore deposits. After the trip, he should fully inherit the title of head of the duchy. Suddenly, the heir to the throne began to strangle the girl. Before her death, the beauty admitted that she was a member of an ancient clan that had long dreamed of dealing with the second prince. At home, Roxy constantly remembered her friend's sad look. Deciding to support Stephanie, the Baroness went to the palace. In one of the halls, the guest met a strange company and asked where she could find the prince's bride. Elizabeth reported that she recently saw her rival walking in the garden. Roxy went with her maid to find her friend. After some time, the girls realized that they were lost. The Baroness heard voices and saw people behind the bushes. In the clearing, Stephanie was talking loudly to Jackson, their servants nearby. Seeing the uninvited guests, the second prince instructed his assistant to remove the witnesses. The servant completed the task with ease. Stephanie was shocked by what was happening. Helen prevented her mistress from screaming in horror. In a few moments, the young Baroness and her maid were dead. The Duchess couldn't believe that her best friend was no more. Suddenly, blood began to flow from Stephanie's mouth due to her excitement. When she woke up, the girl did not remember how she ended up on her bed and how long she had been unconscious. The maid was glad that the mistress came to her senses, sending a colleague to inform her relatives about this. The Duchess remembered her mother again when they looked at a map of countries together and dreamed of travel. Then one of the first meetings with kind, sweet Roxy floated before my eyes when they shared their little successes in mineralogy and stone processing. And now my best friend is no more. Stephanie finally came to her senses when her older brother entered the room. John informed his sister that he was going on a long trip. He would look for new deposits in the mountains, and upon returning from the trip, he would take the place of head of the duchy. The young man said goodbye. Stephanie was left alone. Tears rolled from her eyes. She did not want to live anymore. The maid handed over the box that Roxy wanted to leave to her friend. There was a beautiful crystal processed by her hands. The Duchess again remembered her childhood dreams and plans for a happy future. The girl picked up the jewel. Stephanie went to the window. The sun was shining brightly. The lady was again full of determination. The young Duchess was determined to marry the third prince. The girl wanted to take revenge on Jackson for everything. The main character dreamed of a happy childhood. Mom taught the girl to draw from an early age. These were not ordinary drawings, but large diagrams that the young artist had to reproduce from memory. Little by little, Elizabeth memorized every detail and mechanism. Armando woke up the girl, who was calling her mother in her sleep. The young people started talking, realizing that only here they were safe, without fear of extra ears. The prince tried to find out what items his craftsmen made and how to use them on the farm. Elizabeth had just received a crossbow and was about to test it at the shooting range. At the training stadium, the main character asked Marta to hit the target with magic. The result was magnificent. The maid was well prepared for battle. Elizabeth praised the maid, and it was her turn to show the results. The girl pulled the bowstring and took aim. The crossbow with arrows was well made. A nearby target was hit directly on target. The freed slaves were shocked by the result. They could not imagine that without magic, they could defeat the enemy. After training, Elizabeth went back to studying books in the work library. For the pistol, the main character needed gunpowder. The maid told the lady that her rival had excellent knowledge of minerals and various compositions of rocks. It was necessary to get to know the Duchess better, and the girl carefully studied the history of the noble family. Stephanie had only one brother. Martha couldn't help but wonder where Elizabeth came from with her incomprehensible worldview and knowledge of many things, but absolutely no magic. The main character promised to tell her fantastic story. The maid swore to believe every word of the mistress. The Duchess was the youngest daughter of the head of a large family, constantly expanding its mines in search of valuable rocks and nuggets. The girl's older brother went on one of these trips, hoping to find a new deposit in the mountains, which his longtime assistant Kevin told him about. The search was unsuccessful. Upset John sat in a dilapidated house and waited for the results of the next day. For a week, his people had been walking through the mountains, exploring the rocks. The brother remembered Stephanie's words that she had long ago studied the area on a map. There could not be a deposit in this place. Since childhood, the young Duke was surprised by the abilities of his sister, who was easily given information about minerals and rocks. Her mother constantly asked her father for permission to involve the girl in the family business, but was refused. Despite his weak abilities, John was born a boy and was supposed to become the head of the duchy and the owner of the mines. Having learned about her rival's hobbies, Elizabeth invited her to a tea party. The main character was very friendly and suggested that the bride leave the third prince. The Duchess responded by advising the girl to leave the palace in order to stay alive. Stephanie expected to win and already felt like a princess. Elizabeth suggested that her opponent, instead of getting married, do what she loves and become the head of the family clan, promising to help with this. Shocked by the unexpected advice, Stephanie said goodbye and left the reception hall with her maid. The young Duchess always obeyed her father and never thought about changing power. The girl's idea intrigued her. The main character looked at the untouched sweets and took a mug of tea, discussing the past meeting with faithful Marta. Despite the quick departure of the noblewoman, Elizabeth was happy with the results. The seed of doubt was planted in her rival's smart head. Stephanie, like everyone else in those days, was afraid of poisoning, so she did not touch the delicious dishes. She left, remembering the tempting offer of the prince's chosen one. It was very cold on the distant mountain pass. The young Duke was waiting for news from his squad and discussing the results of the search with his assistant. He was tired and wanted to return home. Kevin promised the owner that workers should come soon with good news, since he was sure that there were rich mineral deposits in this place. The young people were alone in the house, and suddenly the assistant attacked his master. The young Duke managed to dodge the sharp blade. Kevin was determined. He had been waiting for this moment for so many years and was not going to let his owner go alive. With the help of magic, John tried to protect himself from an unexpected attack. The enemy easily repulsed weak resistance. Kevin told the shocked Duke, who had known his assistant for several years, that he was his half-brother. John did not want to believe his opponent's words. Kevin had been planning the murder for a long time. The trip to the mountains was his idea to lure the gentleman out of the estate and to be alone with him. The Duke realized the seriousness of the enemy's intentions and tried to escape. The young man calmly watched the victim. He knew that the servants and guards had been gone for a long time. He deliberately sent them to a dangerous place. John remembered his childhood and his beloved father, whom he respected and was proud of. The old Duke repeatedly told his son that he was the only heir and the hope of the family. The young master was not given knowledge of mineralogy, but he did not want to let his parents down and stubbornly tried to do what he did not like. Kevin easily caught up with the gentleman and took out a magic blade. One blow was enough to mortally wound the Duke. The young man was pleased with the results of his cunning plan. Gathering his last strength, John tried to escape from the enemy. The fiery sword pierced the master through and through. Kevin stood over the body of his dying half-brother, rejoicing in his easy victory. It was necessary to remove traces of the crime, and the killer coolly dragged the bloody body into the yard. Burying the corpse among the stones was not an easy task. The morning in the palace began as usual. The main character spent several hours training every day. In addition to wrestling techniques, the girls did physical exercises. Martha hurried to her mistress to share the latest news. The maid reported that grief had happened in the Duke's family. The eldest son had died in the mountains. The girls became thoughtful. Lately, they had not believed in accidents and coincidences at all. It turned out that the noble family was left without an heir, since all the other contenders among close relatives gradually died under uncertain circumstances. The funeral took place in the family cemetery. The body of John and the small detachment that accompanied him on the expedition was not found. It was believed that they all died in a rockfall. Stephanie was very worried about the death of her older brother. Despite their cool relationship, the girl loved him very much. The Duchess recalled her childhood years when they studied science together. The head of the duchy held on with all his strength and could hardly attend the farewell to his son. Upon returning to the estate, the father asked Stephanie to gather all its inhabitants at the main entrance. The Duke's health deteriorated sharply. He could hardly walk. The girl was very worried about her father and was afraid of losing him. The Duke and his daughter went out onto the balcony and told everyone gathered that his son had tragically died in the mountains as a result of an accident. The next news shocked everyone. The head of the family announced that he had a second heir, who, for health reasons, lived far in the south after his birth and the death of his mother. It was a complete surprise. No one had heard of the boy before. The old Duke introduced his second son to those present. The young man's name was Kevin. No one recognized him as the same business assistant, since he had previously tried not to appear in the castle. The young Duchess was most surprised by her father's words. After the speech, family members gathered in the home meeting room. Stephanie tried to ask her father about the new relative. Everyone knew that the Duchess died during pregnancy along with her son. They were both buried in the family crypt. The Duke admitted that the young man was the girl's half-brother. The noblewoman was shocked by the confession of betrayal. Her father was always considered the standard of fidelity and did not remarry after the funeral of his wife. The head of the family was angry at his daughter's indignation. The old Duke revealed his plan, according to which, in order to preserve the family, Stephanie had to marry the third prince and give birth to 2 sons. Until this moment, the eldest heir in the estate remained the newly emerged heir, who, according to the agreement with his father, subsequently had to cede the title to his nephews. Stephanie did not understand how they could deceive others if the people knew about the fetal death of the baby. The head of the family expressed his dissatisfaction with John, who failed to master the mining sciences and mineralogy necessary for the prosperity of the business, not understanding how his own son could be so stupid. The Duchess analyzed the situation with the sudden appearance of her half-brother immediately after the death of the heir, coming to the disappointing conclusion that it was a pre-planned assassination attempt. The girl was upset by the unflattering assessment of her brother's abilities, who tried very hard to please his beloved father. The conversation in a narrow family circle was interrupted by the appearance of Kevin, who entered the hall without an invitation. Seeing only 2 cups of drink in the young man's hands, Stephanie was very afraid of poisoning and knocked over the tray. In anger, the father hit his disobedient daughter. Kevin was very polite and tried to calm the Duke down. The head of the family, in a rage, sent the girl to prison. as he had done many times in childhood, scolding her for various experiments and successfully mastering knowledge of minerals and crystals. The young Duchess remembered the terrible dungeon. Even her mother could not protect her from punishment. The little girl was very afraid of the dark. As a child, Stephanie used her magic to light up a room a little, and then lay unconscious for hours, recovering the energy she had lost. Tears of grief and despair flowed down the beauty's sweet face. After the loss of her mother, no one could protect her any more. The beautiful, smart, and kind Duchess was the brightest memory of childhood. The owner of the estate was an educated and literate woman. She herself wrote books on crystals and the processing of mountain materials. Having married a noble nobleman, the Duchess had to give up her dream, which she passed on to her beloved daughter and rejoiced at its outstanding results. After her mother's death, Stephanie often spent time in the family library, rereading her works. Sitting in complete darkness, the young noblewoman again recalled her childhood. Morning came. The inhabitants of the palace woke up and prepared for a new day. The main character and her maid asked the prince to accept her. She wanted to secretly enter the duke's castle. Armando was surprised by the bold proposal of his chosen one. Elizabeth was going to sort out the situation with the unexpected appearance of a new heir on the spot. Having received permission to leave the palace, the girl assured the heir to the throne that he would never see his bride again. The third prince was delighted at the sudden end of relations with his chosen ones. He thought that he could profitably get rid of the Duchess with the hands of a jealous admirer, and then publicly execute Elizabeth as an apology. Armando ordered the assistant to follow the main character. Ray was upset. He had to wear a woman's outfit again as a disguise. 3 days had passed since Stephanie was sent to the dungeon as punishment for yet another disobedience. She had to spend a few more days in darkness and loneliness, waiting for her father's mercy. But suddenly the door opened, and her hated rival stood on the threshold. The Duchess was frightened and screamed loudly. Realizing that there was nowhere to wait for help, her maid was temporarily sent to a neighboring castle. The main character instantly appeared nearby and covered the noblewoman's mouth so as not to attract the attention of the guards. Stephanie understood that resistance was useless and mentally said goodbye to her short life.